Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we're taking a walk down the area of product. Managing product, what does that look like, feel like? When we're in a startup scale-up, product is pretty heavy in terms of, do we deliver the right product for our customers? Are we really designing that solution that's going to work? How do we communicate between stakeholders and developers to really ensure that we're on the same path and journey? That product owner, manager becomes a significant role within the business as it grows. And today we're joined by Kirsten, who is a product manager at PX4. Kirsten, thank you for joining us and telling us all about product, and I'm sure it'll be a good conversation around what works, what hasn't, and then we will do onshore, offshore development mix in here. So it'll be a good journey for everyone to listen to and speak to. Thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you for having me, man. That's a bit nerve-wracking, but let's see how we go.
We'll be fine. So, Kirsten, tell us a bit about you, your background in the space of technology, and what drew you into more that product management space.
Sure. So I immigrated back in 2012 to Australia from UK. And landing here, I was a designer, went into a small startup and sort of quite enjoyed the challenges that came, and quickly moved up there into managing the studio and getting a bit more involved. To be honest, design, I came from a print design background, and that sort of slowly was dying at that stage. So I decided to sort of get my hands onto a little bit of technology, understanding sort of UX design, being more web-based, and had a lot of support. And then slowly migrated a little bit into front-end development, especially with React coming out in 2013, all of those things. It was new technology, exciting. And I sort of started doing a bit of both design, product management, as well as front-end development. And then the big problem was that I realized at that stage, back in about 2014, 2015, was product managers generally came from a product management background. What that meant was there was no sort of understanding of design, development, things like that. And that to me was a big sort of gap in the market, that product management should come from one of those strengths to understand how to sort of manage.
It is difficult to, and I've been in business for 16 years developing product and technology, and we've tempered with and tried product managers that aren't technical, or project managers that aren't technical. And it doesn't seem to work, because you sort of got a gap between their understanding of what's really going to work on the other end of product from a technology standpoint. Yes, you might understand the business side, but having some technical background does assist in terms of how the product could come together. So I sort of agree that you need some understanding on both sides of the fence, really.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's the nice thing with me is the fact that I've got quite a broad man of many talents, master of none. So you've got to change the way you speak, the way you sort of interact with people. You've got to be able to speak to the developers, translate what they've said to your designers, to the marketers, to the sales. And having that gap of not being able to sort of communicate across those multiple levels, I always found was a big thing. And that's why product management is actually quite a crucial part to me. But a lot of companies don't see it necessarily always that way. It's sort of the core of our business is development or it's design. And it's sort of, you've got to get that person that has the ability to sort of float in between those areas and speak to them, motivate them, identify sort of problems, and even in certain cases help find the solution.
Yeah, it's critical in terms of the way we can get to a better outcome. If we have someone in the middle that can really understand. I find that a lot of people that go out and try and build technology products, and we support non-techs, that's a critical area for us, and they attempt to manage product, and it becomes very difficult because they don't know how to translate to the developers and understand what they're going through and what the gaps might be, and they really don't get that mark. So they might be led on the wrong path, or they could be just treading water for months because they're not really clear on how to communicate or what a change in scope actually means to a piece of product in terms of, we want to do X, but that changed your whole architecture. So we've got to be very conscious of that as we manage product.
No, definitely, and it's basics like, oh, but it's just a additional input field. It's just the entry, and it's sort of, well, it changes the structure, and if you understand that structure, a little bit of the architecture, it helps you sort of negate the time, the effort. It helps you sort of manage that conversation with the stakeholders. That's the difficult thing, and then, you know, it comes into all the other areas like you building up your tech debt, all of that stuff, having the ability to sort of negate that and build to scale. That's where it's crucial to understand. I mean, your designers do amazing designs, but you pass it on to a developer, and sometimes there's a lot that is overly complicated or intricate that they can't necessarily replicate in code. And having that ability to sort of explain, identify, and sort of make that change to reach these deadlines, that's crucial. And to have that, you've got to have a bit of experience in anything.
Agree, yeah, because just talking back to what you just said, you might get a nice, pretty UX design, but that might take 200 hours to actually build, where if you change something, it might take you 20. There are some
Exactly.
complications when building technology, so some people that are maybe non-technical may not understand. So critical for people to know that, yes, when we're designing something, we need to design for, yes, both experience, look and feel, but then ensure that we deliver that outcome a lot quicker by doing a couple of changes that's important to really get.
Oh, and with the technology we're going towards, it's a crucial sort of part of it. I mean, even the designers that I've worked with as of late, I've sort of, a lot of them through their performance development and stuff like that, I'll encourage them to maybe do a course. You don't need to be able to code a site from scratch, but understanding sort of how your design impacts the way you have to develop it. And there are some amazing courses out there. The last designer that I worked with a couple of months ago, she was amazing, and sort of her her urge to sort of understand how React works, how does my design impact what I do, mobile first, all of those things, scalable, flexibility. And we did that course, and she's amazing at what she does, but I don't think she would have been there if she didn't understand at least a little bit of the code. And like I said, you don't need to be able to be a core coder. Those who can't manage, mate. So that's probably where I come from.
Got it, got it. So tell me about, what does a day in the life of a product manager look like? So when you get up in the morning, it's always a good conversation because you're probably the man of many hats when we talk about this. People might not get
Yes.
this, but yeah, it is a bit more of the putting on different hats across the day. But tell us about what type of stuff you might be doing.
Well, I always found it interesting that sort of when I first started in product management, you're very hands-on, you want to get involved, all of that. And the longer you're in this industry, the longer you sort of realize you need to delegate. So the life at the moment, the more senior you get, the more meetings. And then trying to fit in your day job in between those meetings, speaking to the different stakeholders, speaking to the different teams, being involved in development stand-up, structuring those tickets, managing, talking to the designers, creating a bit of scope. I think that's the nice thing about it is you get to touch on almost a little bit of everything, and that's probably why I like the startups or scale-ups as well, because you get to understand a little bit about everything of the business, and that's product management. On a product, you get to understand and be involved in a little bit of everything within the product, from the ideation, from your user engagement, those user interviews, identifying what their problem is, and then taking it to your designer, doing those prototyping. Then from there, you move to the dev team, where they're not just coders; they're your solution architects. They need to identify what the problem is and how we're going to solve it. And then going back to your stakeholders, explaining why things will take a certain amount of time, what the technical difficulties is. And that's the nice thing about it is you get to sort of engage with all these different levels of people, the different sort of backgrounds, hierarchy, having the ability to sort of work with developers across the world as well is it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted discipline, really. So what you described there, yes, you might have a conversation 1 minute with a developer that's got a problem in terms of delivery, and then the next minute you're talking to a key customer that's really hitting you hard in terms of, all right, we've got a problem here, I need to solve this, this is the issues we've got. So you sort of framed around many different conversations, and then how do you manage that? So what do you do day to day? Because I find it fascinating. Yeah.
It's tricky. I've got to be honest. It's almost like you're multilingual. You've got to be able to speak these different dialects of English. When you speak to a developer, you've got to put on that technical hat, sort of have a bit of a technical discussion with them. From there, you move into the designer, which is your creative, that sort of unique personality that always stands out, has got a bit of flair about them, having to translate to them what they need to do. And then you go to your more senior managers, your marketers, your sales, your Top Gun, sort of very high quality, high think of themselves, solid people that you've got to explain why they need to sell or how it benefits these users. And then the ability to speak to users. And I think that's the nice thing. We touched on it just before we had sort of got online. And what I really like as well is the fact that when we sort of look at product management, it essentially stays the same across industries. You've got the same criteria that you've got to meet. It doesn't matter what industry. Over the last 12 years, I've gone across 3 different industries, vastly different. And yet your product management side of it, those essentials to be successful at what you do, it stays the same.
It's a fascinating piece. We need a really, when you break it down, we need a business outcome we're trying to achieve. And I think people get a bit lost in that.
Yeah.
We need to really solve for users in terms of what they need, want, desire. And are we making their life easier, or are we making it more complicated for them? So there's that front. So business outcome, users. And then how do we get to a solution that's not overly complicated? Because I feel like sometimes people overly complicate technology. If you can solve those little 3 things, I feel like you're in a really good place from
Definitely.
a product perspective. And that comes down to prioritization, it comes down to scope, and how do we manage that? That's probably a question I ask for you. When we're managing a product, scope, priority is critical.
Yes.
We can get lost in building things that people may not need, want, desire, or we just stay in a warehouse. Yeah, let's build this, let's build that. How do you just pare it back and make sure we're focusing on the right things at the right time?
And I've got to sort of say that this is something I've only recently learned in the last 3 years working with the designer that I spoke about, Jess. She was amazing in her sort of ideation and understanding of users. She is a UX expert, and her empathy for the users was absolutely amazing. The understanding, the need, the willingness to create those personas to sort of get. And what I've learned from her is that a user, there's a difference between what they actually need and what they think they need. And that is a thin line of communication. And that's where you've got to sort of sometimes scale it back. Your developers are amazing. They're sort of your solution architects. They create these amazing sort of compromises and are structurally sound sort of solutions. But sometimes you've got to take a look at, you know what, am I building a car to go from here to the shop? Or do I need to stop at 10 different places before I go there? What is the essential? And I think that's where MVP, you've always got that argument of, is MVP worthwhile? Or do we just build from structure up? And to me, the MVP is the essential part of it. Let's build the basics and then we add on all the flair, all the nice things. Once you've got that product, you've got that validity from your users. That's when you can look at sort of adding those extra hours and doing the ad hoc stuff, saying, okay, if you guys do need this, it's that amount. But I think that's probably one of my weaknesses as well sometimes, is the ability to overcomplicate. I find, and again, with this developer, the designer that I've worked with, I found that creating workflows, very simple workflows, actually help you so much in identifying what is the need, what is the purpose, how do you get from A to B with the most efficient and essential sort of application structure behind it.
I'll go back to what you said about MVP for a minute. What's your take on building an MVP to just test the market? Or are you more of a take of let's build an MVP that's solid from the ground up that we can build from? And then I'll share my thoughts after yours.
That's mate. We can talk for hours on the whole MVP because I know
No right or wrong answer to this.
No,
either.
it's a very controversial subject actually.
It is.
For me, it's your MVP is exactly what it says. It's got to be the most viable. It's got to be the most essential. I'm not a big fan of building sort of just for the sake of validating the market. I'm more a bigger fan of let's put the basics in. Let's get the basics up and running. It's almost like sports. If you do the basics right, everything else will follow.
Yeah, you build the basics right, you've got a good foundation.
Exactly. And once you've got that foundation, that's where you can sort of bring things in. And having sort of over the last 12 years since I've moved to Australia, I've purely worked in startups, actually. And seeing how some of them don't get that right, it's let's build all the bells and whistles on this MVP. And it's sort of, well, have we validated it? Do we know if it adds value to the user? Because you've probably had it as well. A lot of CEOs is sort of, but I've been in this market for 10 years. I know what they want.
What they need.
Exactly. And it's sort of, and I think that's my first company I worked with. That was the biggest learning curve for me was we don't always know what they want. And the problem is when you sell a product, you sell it to upper management. You sell it to the guys who pay the bill, not to the people who use it. Not to the ones who actually have to implement it and struggle through it on a daily basis. So yeah, the bill payers, they love these bells and whistles and all the cutesy little things that you can add. But your users is the essential thing, and 9 out of 10 times they just want a basic, simple product, fewer clicks, less effort, less time. That is essentially what they're after.
And we're in so many products. But reality is we're using 10, 20, 30 products all around in business. You're talking more B2B, right? So you've got a B2B client, maybe the CFO's paying, maybe the IT manager's paying, maybe it's the CEO level, maybe it's that marketing director, depends on who it is, but then the users down the bottom, possibly they're sitting in teams. There could be Slack, there could be Word, Excel, SharePoint, they've got all this stuff going on in their world. And then they just want a product to get in, get it out, get their job done and move on. I think we just got to reflect and say, okay, how do we make sure we're not becoming a roadblock for them? Rather, how do we make their life easier, which can change your MVP. I agree on MVP front that if you're really having conversations early with your customers, you can be a bit more confident in what an MVP looks like, and you should be investing in some sort of foundation that you can build upon.
Yes.
Yes, you can build an MVP to throw in the bin. But if you're probably doing that because you're not confident enough that you've got a product that's really going to solve for the market, that's a challenge. So you need to look at that and just take your time, probably have more conversations before we start building anything in the first place.
Yeah, and that's crucial what you touched on there. Is sort of, I've worked for a couple of companies that build something to put it in the bin and then sort of scale from there. And it's sort of, like you said, man, if you do that, you don't have the confidence that what you're presenting to the market does fix a problem.
Yeah,
it's as a product manager as well. That's one of your most effective tools is that cost management, that sort of budgeting, that financial acumen. Why build something that you're not going to use? Why spend that many hours? Build something with a basis. It won't necessarily cover every criteria that they want, but once you present the basics, that's where your customers come in. That's where they add that value of, well, actually, can we look at this? And I love those sort of aspects, that feature enhancement, that, okay, let's take a look at what they've presented.
Gold comes out when you've got something in front of people. There are ways to test this though. So if you've got an idea, right? You've got a concept which I want to build an app. Let's paint a picture. I want to build a Netflix clone. Why? Who cares? Doesn't really matter. but I'm going to build a Netflix clone, and then you've got a base. You can look at the market. What's the market done well? What's the gaps? And then users
Yeah.
might say, a gap for me is I find it difficult to search, and this is why Hubble's come around, right? So there's examples of why things come around. I've got all these
Yeah.
subscriptions, and we're solving problems. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, let's consolidate things together to solve that problem. It's more finding the problem is really the biggest issue, and then how we might go about solving that problem. There's many ways to do that. So that's where the solution comes in. What I find is MVPs can be as simple as, let's wireframe something up, put a pitch deck together or a deck together and start having conversations with customers so we can refine, evolve, and then get a base of what a solution could look like. Generally, a solution comes from a domain expert. I like those areas better because they've been in the problem for a long time. They understand it with some detail. Maybe they don't have all the answers, but they know, right, there's a problem here. I've been doing it this way forever. The market's been doing it this way forever. If we just did this, it would probably add some value. Now go and validate that with 50 people. Ideally, get a number of people that can say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Then you've got a basis of, all right, there's potentially a solution here. Visuals are great. Pictures tells 1,000 words. A UX person might be more valuable than a developer day one. That's what I find really helps with MVP building.
Oh, and that's the thing. You've touched on it there. It's sort of 9 out of 10 times when you do that MVP that you're going to put in the bin, it's sort of, why not use prototyping? Why?
Yeah.
I think companies undervalue prototyping so much. And you know what? I'm a big fan of Figma and the way they've sort of presented that ability that, you know what? I can put it on the phone. It looks like an application. As a user, you probably don't even know the difference. And send that prototype out. Get them to do a bit of a click through. There you go. That could even sometimes sort of constitute as your MVP. They've identified what the product would look like, what the basic ability is, but now to build it, where do we go? What do we do? And that's when those interesting conversations start. Okay, so what's the stack? And then I think one of the biggest challenges I face is then taking what you get back from your users and actually trying to link that to company objectives to sort of say, okay, so how do I now sell this to upper management? How do I get the CEO and the CFO and all of them on board to understand that in the long run, this will be the features that we need to focus on. And once you've done that, some will pass, some will fail, and then having to go back to the users and sort of explaining to them. And you know what? It's communication. That's the big thing, that collaboration.
It's a huge piece, It's collaboration, communication. One thing you said on that just sort of set a bit of a light bulb in my mind is when we're building an MVP, we generally get to a point where we're going to demo it, right? Generally. And then we have conversations around it. Yes, you can put it in the hands of users, but maybe your first point of call is a 10-minute demo. This is what we're doing. So if that's your goal, a Figma demo can be just as powerful as an actual working demo that you can talk to. This is what we're up to. This is what we're building. This is what it looks like. If you're too scared to put it in the hands of users, maybe just start with a demo to start the conversations. So that would very get you to a point of, if your goal is to demo your solution, demo a Figma prototype is the same thing as going to get you to a very similar outcome very quickly.
Oh, exactly. And you know what? That click through a prototype in Figma is so much easier to then translate it to the developers as well. Because
of course,
sometimes, I mean, you've got developers that's amazing at what they do, but they don't necessarily have the creativity to think of how to do it. And that's where prototyping for me is probably one of the most undervalued sort of tools out there that you'd be surprised at how many times I've seen companies not even constitute it, just
jump
using
in and build.
basic. Basically. Well, you've got all these design packages, these NPM packages, and
build something.
exactly.
The bit about us. Started Aerion, which is the core business behind everything we do, about 16 years ago. And it was close to 10 years ago now that DevReady came about. And the whole point of it was we used to build tech that people said, let's just build this. Okay, cool, we'll take it, we'll build it. And we ended up in a position with multinational corporate where we built a solution, technology sound. We spoke with one stakeholder, built it for him, took it to an expo, presented it, didn't go anywhere. And I spoke to my business partner, Anthony, and I said, okay, surely we can do better than that. Yes, do you want to build tech or do you want to build a solution that people want, need, desire, and actually get some cut through? And we sat on that for a little while and said, okay, what do we really need to be? We need to be ready for development, and that's where DevReady started. So it's okay. We went down the path of let's just brand something DevReady, which is a little bit design thinking. It's prototyping. It's building out your user stories. It's getting to an MVP definition before you build anything. Some might say it's a bit of a waterfall model, but I say it's more, let's be agile in design, not as agile in build, and let's manage it more accordingly. So that's where it all stemmed from, and that's what DevReady is all about. So yeah, build prototypes, test, show people something, and really have those conversations. It's much easier to do that in Figma than it is to write a bit of code.
Oh, definitely. And two things you've touched on there is sort of I just love, what was it, 2015, 2016, the whole Agile methodology was big. And it was sort of the big new thing. And to most people, they were never Agile. It was, you know what, having a Kanban board, that doesn't make you Agile.
Doesn't mean you're Agile, no.
No, because you still build what you want till the end product, and then you go to the users. It's that whole engagement of all stakeholders from beginning to end. And that's probably what I think why I love working at PX4. I've only been there for 4 months, but the way they involve their users, the way they sort of actually truly try and build that agile methodology, getting them in from even your technical specifications, that initial design, reviewing, having the mirror board conversations with them. And then once you get to a point, that's when you push it to the developers. That's agile. And throughout that, that's how you build it. But I know developers aren't a big fan because it's sort of, it wasn't in scope, stuff like that. But
I feel like there's a point in agile. Let's go back to MVP for a minute.
Yeah.
If you got an MVP, something's functional, working, that we can get in the hands of users, Agile then becomes so powerful because now we have people giving us real feedback. They're using it in real life. And now we can incrementally do things that are going to be more relevant to users. You're crazy to go and say, okay, we've got an MVP in the market, we've got 100 users, and we've got a roadmap we're building for the next 2 years, and that's all we're doing. If you're going to do that, you're going to fail. But if you have a conversation with those 100 users, they might set you on a completely different path, and that's where Agile really takes power, because you can be really prone to what the user needs at the time, pivot, evolve, and build a product that's really going to go from 100 to 10,000 users because you've really spent the time with what users really need. That's where Agile has power.
Oh, exactly. And it sort of, it helps out your sales and marketing, man. Because if you build something that you sort of constituted, I know the market, you don't always. People use things differently. And your sales then have to sometimes sell something that the user didn't know they wanted.
Yes.
It makes it so much more difficult to scale up your business, stuff like that. Cool. Whereas you get them on their side when you've involved the users from the first point. Because it's things that the users were after. You don't even have to sell it. It's sort of, this is the feature that you guys have asked for. And that's how you get that word of mouth. People moving companies saying, I use this application and it was amazing for me and I think we should implement it in this company. And you realize that the market is really small within this area. So it's getting everybody on board. It's truly working agile. It's probably one of the most difficult things to do.
Oh, it's difficult, yeah, definitely is. Especially the bigger the business, the bigger the business.
Exactly. And I've seen so many companies fail at it, saying, on my website it says we're agile, and it's sort of, you're not. You're waterfall. You just hide it better.
Yeah, understood. Got it. In terms of, what have you seen, because there's a lot of movement around technology, AI is everywhere, how's that impacting product? Because I find that a lot of stakeholders, at the key stakeholders in the top are saying, let's embed AI into our products. There's a lot of impact in AI at development levels too that are coming along. What have you found? Because the market's moving it's always moving, but it feels like exponentially at the moment.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because PX4 is sort of, we've had quite a few of those conversations over the last. AI is the new big thing, isn't it? You've got
Yes.
salespeople sort of pretty much getting it to do their emails, to do their replies. You've got marketing people getting it to write their websites. Now you're wanting people to sort of implement it in applications and things like that. But for me, there's still a very big gap between AI being fully successful and actually moving towards that. Probably one of the most interesting sort of AI implementations in product is, if you have time, go look at Go Scope. It's a friend of mine that sort of created a product management AI product where you sort of say what you want to do, and it actually builds out all the phases for you. And they're now looking at implementing sort of your wireframe, stereo, all of that
Sounds like a little bit of what we're doing in our product. We've got a product, DevReady AI, which is very similar.
Yeah.
So it might be worth a conversation.
Oh, definitely, man. So I would definitely get in touch with them. But AI to me is, we're still a long way away from people losing their jobs because of it. So it's deep learning, and that's the other thing is,
I don't think
what's the
it's
difference
losing
between AI
jobs. The way I frame it, right, is we had a shovel digging in the ground, and then we have a bobcat digging in the ground, and we've got big drills digging in the ground. We build bigger buildings, right? So the more tech we have as humans, the bigger the buildings become. So I find maybe 5 years' time, everyone's got fully custom technology suited to their business because it's easy and adoptable and easy to get to. It will just change the way we deliver outcomes. It's not going to replace people end to end, and you still need people involved in the journey. I see it as more AI supports skilled people at this moment in time. I think it replaces them. It enables you to do 5-10x more. It's not about replacing you, because you still need the nows to be able to have those conversations. So as a product manager, right, how is the AI going to have those 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 conversations with different stakeholders to know where to focus? It's going to be very difficult. It's not going to find those nuggets. You still need someone collating and basically making those decisions supported by AI. That's how I feel it will go. In terms
That's
of
beautiful, good. Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. Is you've got all these people sort of saying, "Oh, AI is going to replace," and that's the thing, is AI is an enhancement to doing what you're doing, giving you more tools and capability to be able to do your job better and quicker than you did before. It will never truly be able to replace. Product management, I know that's on the big scale of people sort of saying, "Oh, but with these AI tools, with GoScope, all those things, we can replace product managers." And it's sort of, well, you can't really. No, it's these tools will help us be better at what we do. But
I'll to give you a real life example. So the DevReady AI product we built is for us. So it's an internal product which enables our core architects, which are the guys that are sitting in more product, business and technology, able to bring scopes together in our DevReady space. It enables us to do things 5 times faster. It won't replace, but it enables us to do things quicker, more effectively, and probably in more detail than we ever could have done before. That's where the power is. I feel like you're going to get more value and bang for buck because of AI. That's where I see it.
Exactly. And that's probably where you sort of look at, there's an amazing quote where sort of AI would be the knowledge and the wisdom would come from that individual. And one of my most famous quotes comes from Irish rugby player, where he sort of said, knowledge is to understand and know that tomato is a fruit. But wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And that's what you've got there, is AI will be able to identify and do all of that, but you still need the wisdom behind it, and that will be the individual using that tool to actually.
Very well put, Christian. It's been a pleasure getting on the DevReady Podcast. We'll probably end it there because it's a good way to end it. Thank you for coming on and sharing your insights into product and what it really means. And I hope people get a bit of insight into what it means to be really a product manager / owner, because there's a bit of a muddled sort of mix there, and a little bit about MVPs and how we might go about doing it. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
No, thank you so much, mate. Thank you for having me and for reaching out, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, Christian.
Have a good one, man.